Today's show is sponsored by Money Insights and their investment optimizer strategy. In my book, I share how I use this same strategy starting over a decade ago to invest my money in two places at one time. This strategy has been used by the wealthiest for generations for estate planning, minimizing taxes, preserving wealth, and increasing stability for their investments. Now you can do the same thing. In addition, you can build a plan to build an emergency fund, pay for college, fund a business, plan for retirement, and ultimately optimize your total financial picture. To find out more information, check us out at the banking link at nextlevelincome.com. On today's show, we have Matthew Stibbe. Matthew is a serial entrepreneur, marketing maven, writer, pilot, and wine enthusiast. Not necessarily in that order. He created marketing strategies, content, and campaigns for clients, including Microsoft, Google, LinkedIn, and Hewlett-Packard, as well as contributing to Wired, Forbes, and Popular Science as a writer. Currently, he is CEO at Articulate Marketing, a UK marketing agency specializing in the technology sector. Also, his geek credentials are strong, which we love here on the Next Level Income show. Previously, he was founder and CEO at Intelligent Games, a 70-person computer games company where he designed games for Lego and produced two games based on Dune.
Welcome to the Next Level Income Show, where it's our goal to raise your income, investments, and life to the next level with your host, Chris Larson. Get your free copy of his book at nextlevelincome.com/book. Also, if you're an accredited investor, check out the Invest link to learn how to gain access to institutional quality real estate opportunities.
Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I love having guests on that are not from the United States, that are somewhere else in the world. And I don't know if we should let the audience guess where you are, Matthew, or maybe they can take some hints from your clocks on the wall and your accent. But why don't we spill it? Why don't you share where you're coming to us from today? And also, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background.
Well, I'm coming to you from sunny West London. As you can tell from my accent, I'm English by upbringing, but actually mostly by heritage. And it's very warm over here right now. We're having a bit of a heat wave. So, but when I'm not being warm and talking to lovely podcast hosts, I run a marketing agency called Articulate Marketing. But I have other things that I have done. Computer games company for more than 10 years. I have a commercial pilot's license and I flew a lot. I'm a big fan of Lego. I used to design Lego computer games, in fact. And
really?
Lego is just
my gosh.
I
got to go grab my younger son. I should bring him. Oh, he would.
And
he would
this side is
out.
all my old computer.
Oh, check that out.
Right? Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm really a bit of a geek. And it's funny you should ask me, you very correctly assumed that I'm in England. But the funny thing was when I was doing my commercial license, because I have a US and FAA license, they made me do a test to check if I could speak English. And I've got a degree in history from Oxford. I kind of grew up in England. No, you got to do a test. You're not from the USA. So I'm fully authenticated as an English speaker by the US government.
There we That's, you know what? There is nothing more bureaucratic than something like that, right? That definitely. Well, yeah, I just left the meeting this morning, so I coach my son's cycling team, and I've raced bikes on and off for 30 years, and to be a coach, I had to get certified in on the bike skills after having had nearly 3 decades of race experience. So just to, I had to be certified that I could ride a bike, even though I've been riding since I was, for 40 years, but yeah, it's funny. But I think the audience is more interested in hearing a little bit more about what you're doing today. I'd like to go back in time. So you're the gaming company that you had, you sold that, right, to another gaming company?
I sold it to my management team in 2000 after starting it in my bedroom at aged 18. And when I sold it, there were 72, 73 people. So I was a young entrepreneur and went on to do other things afterwards.
Yeah.
And that was a learning curve, a bit of a baptism of fire sometimes as well. I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm one of my passions is helping teach young people about not only investing, but also entrepreneurship. And I think it's so valuable. It's something we don't do a good enough job in school. And you said you started that company at 18. How,
So,
like, kind of, and how long did you run that for, Matthew?
well, I was about 12 years, but the first few years I was at university as well. So it started being a business with employees the after I left university, which was 91. So it's about 9 years, 10 years with employees, and starting small and then growing. But I designed, when I was at university, I designed a game that was eventually published by Electronic Arts. It was a space strategy game. And I designed a game for another company about the Vietnam War, sort of a war game, political simulator. I was interested in playing games and designing games. And, that's how I got myself through university, I suppose. And after I left, I interviewed with, I did what we call in England the milk round. So I went and interviewed with all the banks and the management consultancies. Most of them didn't want to have anything to do with me. I was too weird. Some of them offered me a job. And I was like, do I go and work for this management consultancy, or do I just go carry on with the computer games? And
yeah,
I went down the entrepreneurial route, and I don't regret that at all. I'm very much I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven, as Milton put it. Because for me, it's very important to have autonomy and to have some control over my environment and sort of make something and build something. But my thinking about running a business and kind of the ambition for it has sort of evolved a little bit. I think I'm also interested now in kind of what impact my business has on the environment, on communities I work with, on clients and the supply chains. That there's a little bit more, it sounds a bit woolly and a bit do-goody, and I don't mean it to be, but there's a little bit more sort of conscience about it. That has value for me now, as well as just sort of building a business and making some money, which is also important.
I love John Mackey, who founded Whole Foods. He talks about conscious capitalism, and his belief is you can do it both. Like, you can do both. You can do good and you can make money. And, that's what, it's a great book. I read it, several years ago.
I think the two things are interrelated, actually. I think purpose is very important for business. I think it's really valuable for owners, managers, entrepreneurs, and employees to feel like they're working for a company that has something in mind when they're doing it, some intent, some value. I mean, if we were only doing things for the money, we'd all end up being pimps and drug dealers, right? That's, if you didn't have a conscience and no ethics at the one end of the extreme,
or maybe work on Wall Street or politics.
Yes, I would. There are definitely, there's a spectrum that starts, over there and works its way along. And gosh, this all sounds terribly good, but I think it's important to have some direct. And I think that businesses that genuinely have that and enlist the support and encouragement and engagement of their staff and their managers, align around a direction that they believe in, I think they do better.
No, I agree. And Simon Sinek talks about that. And I'd love to, this is a great segue. The why, like, what's the why behind what you do? Do people believe in that? And a big reason why I wanted to have you on, Matthew, is because, I think an entrepreneur that then goes on to have a company handles affairs a little differently than somebody who's always been in the corporate world. So I'd love to hear, like, why did you decide to sell that company? And, what's been the evolution between that point in time and where you are today?
Well, yes, the sale of Intelligent Games is a story. Certainly at that time, I really enjoyed making, designing, playing computer games when I was, that was the thing that made me start it. Yeah. And suddenly, it probably snuck up on me in the way that pot of boiling water sneaks up on a lobster, that actually I wasn't doing the fun things that I wanted to do. I was talking to lawyers and accountants and negotiating contracts and having difficult HR conversations and recruiting people and, writing business plans and looking at spreadsheets a lot. I was like, okay, unless your idea of a fun real-time strategy game is, video game company, that wasn't fun. I mean, it's funny, there are computer games now where you run a video game company, but that's another story. For me,
Really?
I'm like, why would I ever?
I would not
that
buy
was
that.
10 years of my life. But so I kind of I at that time I was not a very experienced manager, and I didn't, I was struggling with it a little bit. I was, I wasn't necessarily mature enough or experienced enough at that stage to run a 70-person company, and I hadn't quite got the kind of ability to go and what I've been doing the last 10 years or so is mentors and coaching and training and learning and reflecting on it. So I wasn't having fun. I was beginning to feel a little bit like a bottleneck and a valve to progress. And at one point, one of our clients came along and almost bought us, and it just fell through at the last minute for various reasons outside our control. And once colleagues realized that I was actually always a bit frustrated, and they wanted to take over and run the business, and they thought this deal, they said, look, Matthew, we'll buy you out. You go do whatever it is you want to do, and we'll carry on running the business. And it was a good outcome in the sense that everybody got what they wanted.
Yeah.
I tell you something, I sold the business and I walked out of the office having signed, sheafs and sheafs of paper, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. But I did know I didn't want to employ anyone else again. Well, I've broken that rule. And I did know I never wanted to have another office again. And I have kept that. We've always been at my marketing agency now. We've always been remote working. So, it was probably a decision against what I was doing rather than for something else. I think that journey of running a games company had sort of run its course for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, go ahead.
Sorry, it reminds me, as a very wise friend of mine said, it's never too late to have another happy childhood. And by extension, the job you're in, or the company you started, or the career path you started going down, that is not a lifelong commitment. You can change your mind. You can do something else. Life is a long time. You can do different things.
Wow. I want to pause on that because there's a book. It's called My Plan to Live. I think it's to live to 152, and I may be messing up the number there, but it's by Dan Sullivan, who founded Strategic Coach, and he basically has, he says, hey, technology is going to change. I don't know what it's going to look like, but he's in his 70s right now. He's like, I'm going to live basically another 75 plus years, 75, 80 years, and it's a mind exercise where you say, well, wait a minute, what kind of impact would I have if I lived, say, 20 or 50 years longer than I think I'm going to live? Because a lot of people think, hey, I'll live to 80, maybe 100. What if you lived to 120? What if you lived to 150? How would you live your life differently? Mm-hmm. And I think it goes into play. And this is why people say, oh, Chris, you retired. And I always say, no. I use air quotes if you're listening. I retired because I don't like that word. I've kind of changed, turned the page in the chapter of my life. And I think, a lot of people go and they choose a profession that makes sense for them for a certain reason at that point in their lives. But as they evolve, and especially, if you're 18 or 20 or 25 years old, and now you're, like I am, in your mid 40s, and you have a couple of children, your values change, your desires change. And, if you have the freedom financially to do different things, then you get to choose those things. And I think a lot of people would choose to continue to work and have an impact in this world if they had the freedom to do it.
Yeah, I agree. But here's an interesting life experience for me was, as I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I came out of that and I tried, or I thought about, and I explored all kinds of different things.
And how long? Like how long was this period?
about 2-3 years. I was a bit of a
Okay.
dilettante at different things, and I was lucky because I had a little bit of a financial cushion that allowed me to try stuff.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: I did not know at the beginning what I wanted to do. I didn't know I was going to start a marketing company. I didn't know I was going to find a career as a writer. But I started writing for a magazine, just somebody that I knew, and I wrote and I loved it. And I just, that ability to just, what did it, Mal said it, I think, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and just sometimes allow experimentation, try a few things. I mean, even if you're in a job, you can write a blog in the evening, or write music or whatever it is that's gonna do it for you. I think it's not just a case of being stuck in a job. It's also just stuck in a mindset where you just do one thing. Anyway, so my journey was through writing, and I wrote for some magazines, and then I started writing a bit for Wired, and I started writing for Popular Science and these American magazines, and I got my pilot's license. So I thought, I know what, I will write reviews of business jets, because that sounds like fun, right? And so I wrote, I don't know, a couple of dozen of those for various magazines, and that was quite fun. And anyway, I ended up bumping into some people from the UK government. The Design Council was a government body at that time. It's now independent. And I bumped into some people from Microsoft, and they both separately hired me as a writer. And I thought, it's much nicer writing for companies because they really appreciate what I do. They're really, and they pay a lot more than magazines. And I'm very curious about business. I like business. I have some business experience. And suddenly I stopped being a freelance writer, journalist, and I started being effectively a marketing copywriter. And that was around 2002, 2003. That's where articulate marketing came from. My first clients were Microsoft and the government's Design Council. So not a bad start. I think there's a bit of serendipity and luck in that.
Wow. And I think it's fairly unique because coming out of an engineering program, writing usually isn't a technologist or an engineer's strong suit. But that didn't seem to hold you back.
Well, there are some extraordinarily good writers who are also engineers, or vice versa. Right. Michael Collins, who went round the moon when Neil Armstrong went down and landed on the moon, his book, his autobiography, he wrote it, he didn't ghost it, and it's really well written. So, he's an example of that.
Yeah.
I sometimes make this observation that almost everybody can write, but not everybody is a writer. But writing, combination of two things. There's a set of technical writing skills. You have to actually learn about controlling suspense and, sentence structure and article structure and interview techniques. There's a whole bunch of practical things that probably I could teach somebody in a couple of weeks, and they could refine to a certain level in a couple of months, right? There's that. And then there's the sort of the passion, commitment, interest, and curiosity in the world, and the kind of the energy that you need to face the blank page and fill it with words that are interesting, right? And there's a sort of, you need to find a well for that, whether you're writing a novel or nonfiction or magazine articles or marketing copy. If you've got both of those things, you're a writer.
Yeah.
If writing an email for your work, that's not being a writer, that is just writing.
There we go. I like that. That's a great definition. So now you help other technology companies with marketing. Is it mainly through writing, or how's the interplay? How's that evolved over time now? And are you still working for other companies, or are you freelance now again?
So I run Articulate Marketing. We're 18 people, so I have another business. At the heart of what we do is copywriting, which is coming from my heritage and experience and passion for that. But we've added website design and development. We've added marketing automation. We've added sales enablement. We've added various strategy and consulting elements so that we can do quite a lot of marketing things for clients. And we work for Dell Technologies at the high end, large companies all the way down. Our smallest client has 3 people in it, but they're super ambitious. So, we mainly work in the B2B technology space. it's the geek area of interest for me throughout my life. So I'm writing for software and technology companies, except these days I'm not writing so much. I'm mainly, talking to lawyers, accountants, and looking at spreadsheets again. But I'm enjoying it this time.
Oh, there you go. I like that. So it's interesting because you've always been fully virtual with your company, Articulate Marketing now, and this is something that has rapidly gained momentum here during COVID. What have you learned, and what can you kind of advise other companies that are struggling with this process right now, Matthew?
Yeah, I like to say we were doing remote working before it was fashionable, but so well, we went through that COVID home working thing without breaking a stride because we were used to it. But one of the things that COVID took away from us for a couple of years, and we're just now starting to plan again, is company meetings. So one of the things that we thought was very important for remote working is that we bring people together regularly and build those social connections and out of work relationships, and just sort of see people and put some into the bank account of trust and relationships, right?
Makes a big difference. And this is in person.
Yeah. So before COVID, we were meeting 4, 5, 6 times a year for a couple of days at a time. And we pay for everyone's trips. We put them up in hotels. We fly them in. We used to do it in Berlin and London and places all over. Cool. So doing that is quite important, I think. And we're looking forward to getting back to that. What else have I learned about working remotely? Well, fundamentally, you need to be a good manager, whether you're working remotely or not, right? So, it's everything that you do to be a good manager in an office, you have to do a little bit better as a remote worker. I will that lovely story about Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. She said once in an interview, I did everything Fred did, but I did it backwards and in heels, right? So remote working is a bit like working in a real office, but backwards and in heels. Just a little bit more effort, a little bit more mindfulness, a little bit more consciousness about about the communication style. Yeah. We think it's really important to measure output and results rather than input, so we don't do timesheets.
Wow, yeah.
For example, and that would be a really easy thing to, I think most people's first reaction to remote working is, okay, I want you to keep timesheets. You tell me exactly how long everything took. And that doesn't really work because there are lots of reasons. I could bore for England about why timesheets are awful. It's also, I think, very important to pay attention to culture. And so we have, for example, we're an 18-person company, but we have a happiness officer, and her job is morale and engagement, and, a little bit of pastoral care. That's a real commitment.
You feed her like caffeine and antidepressants, or I'm joking. So,
well, part of her job is to send people birthday presents and Christmas presents.
Love it.
You don't have to have alcohol at Articulate, but if you are open to having alcohol, you will probably get a bottle of wine twice a year from Liz. So, or something. For a little while, we were producing our own gin. So we
my summer favorite.
We went off to the Cambridge distillery and sat down with Will there, who's the head distiller, and we created our own gin, and then he would batch it up and. But so the writer's gin was a thing for a few years. Anyway, so cool. Just paying attention to this kind of thing is quite important. And the B Corp thing is very important for us. It's another way of measuring and testing and validating and committing to our values. And that helps, I think, just to make people feel like they belong and make sure they feel like they're aligned and engaged with the business.
Yeah, let's dive into that for a moment here, because for listeners who don't know what a B Corporation is, you're a certified B Corp. Explain that a little bit for the audience, please.
Sure. So B Corp movement and a kind of a register of certified businesses, and it's an audited objective standard for companies' commitment to the environment, to their stakeholders, their communities, their people. And it's about business as a force of good. But the key word there is business. We're still here to make money, right? But we're trying to do it in a provably, demonstrably well-run, respectful, ethical, if I can use, I'm using air quotes now for people listening at home, ethical way. I don't mean ethical in the sense of ironic, but
we didn't wink. You didn't wink
wait,
for people.
wait,
yeah, you used air quotes, but you didn't wink. So
the point being, that there's an awful lot of freight with the idea of ethical business, and what B Corp does is it makes all of that very practical. There's a very long audited checklist of things that they would like you to do, that you can do to prove that you are a B Corp. So, for example, the relationship or the ratio between the most highly paid people in the company and the lowest paid people in the company, and you get some points if it's a narrow ratio, and you lose some points if it's a big ratio. So each of these things is scored, and you complete this assessment. And by the way, anyone can go and do for their business for free on the B Corp website. You get a score. When we started the certification process, we were scoring about 30, 35, and the threshold for being it's on there's 140, 150 is the upper limit at the moment.
Gotcha.
The threshold for certification at that time, it was 70. So we knew we had to do some work to get to the certification threshold, and you can get that certification from different things. But once you've got that, what it gives you also is this incredible roadmap of, we do this and this and this, and it's like a project for making the business more practically well run, more respectful, more environmental. And I think it's that practicality that's very valuable.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think, it's, I like the saying, what's measured matters. And if you're measuring it, you show that it matters. And man, I really love the results-based management style. Yeah. Look, I was in sales for most of my career. So, no one ever asked me how much I worked, although I did have one manager, and one of my coworkers said, why don't you just follow them around for a day and see if you can keep up? And that was the end of that conversation. But Matthew, how do you,
we're great believers in OKRs, for example, along those lines. Sorry, you were going to ask me a question. I interrupted.
Oh, no, go ahead. Would say that one more time?
Oh, well, so we like a lot of companies use OKRs, but amongst our company objectives, our core objectives, we have the goal of becoming net zero, and we're progressing towards that in various ways. We currently offset our CO2 emissions. We have objectives around supporting communities and various allyships. So, we're putting these objectives actually in the same mechanisms as our sales targets, as our customer retention targets, and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. How, as a leader, especially in a virtual organization, do you really kind of, filter these ideas down or disseminate these ideas down to your employees?
Yeah. I'm very wary of the danger of cynicism, right? I mean, there's nothing more dispiriting than a corporate boss standing up and going, we are going to be good. Right. Google saying, don't be evil, because it opens you up to any time that you do something somebody disagrees with, they go, well, you said you were going to be. For us, I think one of the things that's been very pleasing about becoming a B Corp and then progressively improving our score and working on those issues in the way we've involved the staff. So we have working groups within the company at the moment focusing a lot on the net zero work and some other things that we're prioritizing. And engaging them in the decision making, engaging them in the project, making them part of that. I think that's the way that you enlist their support. I think if B Corp is a top-down tick boxing exercise, kind of have failed from the start. Yeah,
no, I think again, going back to Simon Sinek, like especially with this generation, I think these things make a big difference. What are some of your advice to companies that are having a hard time finding and retaining talent? Because we're having, I mean, one of my coaching clients, they're just struggling to find, kind of lower end, $15, $20 an hour type employees. But I had the same issues when I was hiring people that were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah. And I feel that pain. We're recruiting right now for 2 roles. And, historically, we would put up an advert for a marketing copywriter and we'd get 600-700 applications. We were a little company. For us, being a remote working company in the old days was a real differentiator, right? But now, Not so much. And of course, we're dealing with this very volatile and uncertain economy, and we're dealing with the Great Resignation, if that really is a thing. There's a lot going on in the world that is affecting that. For my part, the things that we're trying to do to rectify this, we're putting work into our employer branding. So, for example, on our website, we're adding more about what to work here, what are benefits, and kind of what the things that we do that are interesting, to try and surface some of these stories rather than just like, we're a nice company, work for us. We've been working, we hired last year a very experienced CFO who had come out of a large corporate environment, and she brought a lot of, I would call, sort of rigor and precision she took on the HR role as well as the financial to all our sort of HR processes. So bonuses, appraisals, recruitment, job descriptions, intranet, all that stuff. And we've just hired now for 1 or 2 days a week an HR consultant to help us specifically with recruitment and the branding. So it has become progressively sharper and sharper in focus. And I guess as it becomes harder, it becomes a thing that you have to invest more in. That's my experience. And generally in business, I find if you want something done, if you kind of make it somebody's job, it, and then you measure their progress on it, and then you work with them to develop the initiatives and discover best practice, especially if you can get experts in. That's the way to do it. I have to tell you, I don't have all the answers on this. I thought we had it nailed, and then suddenly we're in the same boat as everybody else, and we're working quite hard to recruit right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, talent it's such a challenging thing to find and do that, and you have to always be working at it.
Well, but like you, I suspect I've run businesses through, up business cycles and down business cycles, and the dot-com crash and the 2008 financial crisis. And I remember hiring programmers for my games company in the early 90s, and there was a economic crisis back then, and it was really easy for a couple of years, and then it was really difficult, and then it was really easy, and then it was really difficult. The market and the economy are one of my friends gave me this very good advice. He said, there are lots of things that you have in your control, right? And there's lots of things you don't have in your control. I have no control over, for example, this awful war in Ukraine. I can't make it stop. I can't do it. I have no control over my stupid government and who is and isn't prime minister, right? I can't do anything about that. I can't really do anything about the economy or coronavirus, except perhaps protect myself, my family, and my colleagues. So I have to work with what I've got in my control, and kind of also spend my psychic energy on things that I can control and not worry too much what I can't.
So great. So great. My coach says, control what you can, cope with what you can't, and concentrate on what matters. And I love that. Love that. So before we wrap up, I got to ask you something. So I've been hearing a lot about the Metaverse. Okay. So we do a lot of real estate investments, and people are starting to talk about, hey, we can buy real estate in the Metaverse. From somebody that used to design video games, Matthew, I'd love to hear if you have any perspective or opinion on the Metaverse in the future as we kind of start to blend the real world with the digital.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Should we do a whole nother podcast on that?
Yeah. Well, okay. I have a couple of thoughts, and I am starting from quite a cynical place about this, right? It doesn't, I've read Snow Crash, and I've read, books about
Snow Crash
being in virtual realities. And, when we were working with Lego back in the 90s, they were doing a lot of early stage virtual reality, and they had all the craze of those silicon graphics machines, and VR goggles went way before anyone else. Wow. It's a bit like AI. It's always 5 to 10 years away from being, universal.
Right.
Well, maybe there's some AI that is universal.
And Google.
So
you work with Google.
Yeah, you can speech recognition is commonplace now, and it wasn't 10 years ago. But So I am skeptical when people tell me we're all going to be wearing AR glasses and VR glasses, where, it's not yet. It may come. So that's the first thing. So, there's a hype cycle, and don't believe the hype, in my opinion. Second thing, I would not. I think anyone who is selling you real estate in the metaverse is selling snake oil, right? Because the cost to create more real estate in the metaverse is zero, right? So what value does it have? And we've been through this. I'm old enough to remember Second Life and all the hype about that. Companies buying it, slices of Second Life. Well, where is that now? And I remember giving some advice to a client who was like, "We're going to set up a place in the Second Life, and we're going to do this and this and that." Don't do it. It won't be here next year. And, luckily they didn't, and it wasn't. So I would be a fast follower in the metaverse. I wouldn't be an early adopter. That's maybe just being cynical.
Yeah, well, I like that perspective, but I'm a little biased. We got a lot of real estate, so it's real and it's here. But it is fascinating to think like what the future may bring there. Before we wrap up, I don't think I mentioned this in the intro here, but you also have, and you're really a Renaissance man. Let's see if the audience can believe this. You also have an advanced wine diploma as well, on top of your commercial pilot's license and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I don't mix the two hobbies, right? That's not.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, what's your favorite wine to drink while flying?
I like a nice Pinot Noir when I'm coming into land at Heathrow. So if you've seen that film Somme, where they've been constantly tasting, that's a master sommelier exam, and there's in the UK that's a master of wine. I did the one below that. It took me 2.5 years of study. I was doing all the tastings and everything that you see in that film. I reckon between me and my wife, when we were doing it, because we both did it together. That's
fun. Yeah.
We ended up tasting professionally, meaning notes and kind of calibrating more than 1,000 wines over 2.5 years for this course. So now I'm back to being an amateur wine drinker. But the only benefit of all of this study, apart from the pleasure of doing it, is one, I have much more expensive tasting wine than I used to, which costs me money. And two, whenever I go to a restaurant, people always hand me the wine list.
It's not bad. Yeah, I'm the same way with whiskey and bourbon. It's like the more I learn, the more I drink, the more expensive my hobby gets. And
it's a slippery slope. Yeah.
My favorite Pappy's is the 23, and I blindly I was like, oh, that's a bummer. Well, hey, let me see. So, what is your favorite wine for the value right now? Well, we're going to end with this little nugget for the audience.
This is I'm going to get a little bit on my horse, right?
Go for it. I'm going to go and buy it right after this before I publish the episode too.
Well, okay, I'll give you a specific wine recommendation. I'll give you a general thing. I think French wine is significantly overpriced and overvalued and overesteemed. You pay 2 or 3 times the price for a good French wine than for an equivalent. So if a collectible, Van der Gaard kind of library wines, I'm really interested in really good Barolos. I'm really interested in Amarones, and I'm really interested in like Italian, in Spanish, like Vega Sicilia or something like that. So these really, Grand Cru, non-French wines. So that, I think that's where I would go. So Vega Sicilia Unico would be my highest. But I think where there is real value right now, and this is probably a little bit distant for your American listeners. My wife is Romanian. I have been to Romania. I love the Romanian wine scene. There's a producer there called Aurelia Vișinescu who produces really good French-inspired wine in Diare, and her Pinot is fantastic. All her international varieties, but she has also the Romanian classic grape. Fatasca Negra. She makes a wine called Tre Fete Negra out of that, and it's phenomenal. It's 20, 25 pounds a bottle. If you see it anywhere, grab it. But I'm going to give you one last tip on wine, because I'm a big fan of Romanian wine. But if your Romanian wine has Dracula on the label, don't buy it. It's for tourists.
I love it. Oh man, this is that's a nice little nugget here as we build out our wine cellar here. And I really thank you for that. Cause that's my favorite is finding like a good bottle of bourbon for less than $50 that you don't feel guilty drinking, but you can also keep a shelf.
Widows from Brooklyn bourbon.
Black Widow. Or Widow Jane.
Yeah. I had some over the weekend. I just got it. I thought that was fantastic. Yeah.
The Widow Jane 10 years, great. Yeah, my one of my best friends gave me a bottle. It's fantastic. It's $60 or $70 a bottle now. But I'll have to maybe I'll shoot you an email with a couple of my favorite suggestions currently, and we can trade suggestions, Matthew. But again, we're probably gonna have to have you back on here because I feel like we can continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we're out of time as we look at your back wall there. Matthew, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, your knowledge with our audience today.
It's been my pleasure, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Chris here again. I hope you found this episode valuable. Now, I have one more thing to gift you. We have a page for my coaching clients where you can get a free copy of my book, as well as much more from previous guests on the show. Just check out nextlevelincome.com/coaching to get a free copy of my book, audiobook, and much more. I'll send you a copy of my book and cover all the shipping costs as a thank you for listening to the podcast. Also, please like, share, and take just 90 seconds to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts.